Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to be with us today to learn more about full decrim of prostitution explained, or full decriminalization of prostitution explained. We also want to thank the panelists, including survivor leaders, law enforcement, and advocacy organization for taking the time to share with us what they encounter on a day-to-day basis and what they encountered in the past. We also asked for solutions to the oldest oppression, not profession, in the world. My name is Rima Nashashibi, and I'm founder and president of Global Hope 365, a 501c3 nonprofit whose goal is to end harmful practices against women and girls, such as child marriage, human trafficking, and other forms of gender-based violence. A few housekeeping points. All questions need to go in the Q&A portal. Julie Levi will monitor the Q&A during the webinar and at the end when we have the Q&A session. The chat is disabled among the attendees, but you can chat with us, the panelists. So this is a Zoom webinar, and you will only be able to see the panelists. Thank you again so much for attending. This host group is an informal coalition that got together to end child trafficking, educate and raise awareness to prevent future victims, advocate for trauma-informed exit strategies for survivors, and to hold perpetrators accountable, both buyer and trafficker, for the trauma and harm they caused. This webinar will be recorded. Our first speakers are survivor leaders, Marjorie Saylor and Jessica Kim. Andrea Powell was going to be with us, but she's stuck in Belgium trying to find another doctor to give her a clean bill of health from COVID, because the initial one didn't put that information online, but she may be able to join us. And so Marjorie and Jessica, you have Jessica, I guess. I don't see Marjorie. So Jessica, you have 5 minutes. Go for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Jessica Kim. I am the project director of educational pathways at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation. We're a center within Point Loma Nazarene University. And so thank you for being here today to hear about full decrim. But more importantly, about solutions that can have a great positive impact on the people who are most being impacted by trafficking. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is mental health wellness. And since the pandemic, mental health is something that each one of us can somehow relate to. As you can see in my bio, I am also a survivor of trafficking. I'm a survivor who experienced trafficking at a very young age. My grooming process began by my trafficker at the age of 8 years old. What I didn't know at 8 was that I was being groomed into sexual exploitation and eventually into trafficking. One of the things that are intentional by traffickers is to make sure that survivors or victims lose our identity, or in my case, my childhood. And along with that, I lost my voice. My voice had been silenced, right? I was groomed to repeat the words of my trafficker. And when asked by anyone in the community how I was doing, I would say, I'm fine. I don't need anything. When I was asked who this man was beside me, I would say he is my stepfather. Instead of what I really wanted to say, which was, I need help. I am hurting. I'm in danger. He is a trafficker. Because I didn't have the support or the opportunities or resources to leave this situation, I had no choice but to stay. And I stayed until I was 18 years old. This trauma caused years of suffering, not only while I was being trafficked, but also after leaving the trafficking situation. what happens with trauma, specifically with survivors of trafficking, is we oftentimes have, just PTSD. And so this trauma stays within our bodies, and so it gets stuck in our body. The night terrors, the constant looking over my shoulder, the hyper state of alert, all of these symptoms I lived with for many years. And it wasn't until I could have access to mental health resources, psychiatrists, and to exit strategies was I able to heal from my trauma and from my life experience. I'm grateful that I was one of the fortunate ones that was able to exit that situation. That is not often the case for many of us. So most of us do not get a chance to get out and to exit and to heal. Mm-hmm. So all of the work that I do now is in trafficking and offering exit strategies for people who want to exit the life of exploitation, who want to exit trafficking. Currently, in the work that I do, I am leading the On-Ramps Collaborative, which is a collective impact initiative to increase access to educational and vocational opportunities for survivors of trafficking. And this is what we need. We need exit strategies. We also lead one of the scholarships, one of the only scholarships, I might say, in the state of California for survivors of trafficking who want to pursue their education and vocation, higher education. And I also lead the Flourish Academy, which is a life skill program. All of these things are opportunities for survivors to have access, exit strategies. We also have the No More program, which is a prevention curriculum. This is for middle school and high school age youth. So these are only a few examples, right? But what we need today is your support. We are doing the hard work. We need the support. I'm urging you here today to support us in providing these exit strategies for people who are being trafficked and for people who want to exit the life of exploitation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Program Director, Educational Pathways at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation at the Point Loma Nazarene University. Thank you so much for sharing your history and your path and your successes with us. We really appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Marjorie Saylor. She's a survivor leader and founder CEO of The Well Path. Marjorie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. Thank you for being here. My name is Marjorie Saylor. I am, like Rima said, the founder and CEO of a program called The Well Path. The Well Path provides emergency hotel stays and mentorship, and we try to fill the gaps where with survivors of trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, that maybe they're waiting for a bed in a long-term shelter program. Maybe they're just needing rent for a month. Maybe they're needing peer support, mentorship, whatever it looks like to keep someone from going back into an exploitive situation, or to just get them out of that situation to begin with. That's what the Well Path tries to provide. I'm also the program director for a long-term residential shelter for adult female survivors of sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And I've been doing this work since about 2015, not too long after coming out of my own experience in exploitation, which I want to talk about a little bit. I want to highlight my experience as a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. And I want to kind of highlight how the two are inextricably linked. We cannot have one without the other. And my upbringing, I grew up in church. I grew up in a good household. However, there were issues in my household. There was domestic violence. between my parents. There was early childhood sexual abuse from the age of 5 on up to 14. Around the age of 14, I decided I didn't want to stay in the situation anymore. I wanted to leave, and I ran away from home thinking I could give myself a better life, a better opportunity. I could get away from the chaos, and I just ran into the arms of exploitation even more. I was labor trafficked by 3 different businesses by the time I was 18, and going into becoming 21. I had worked a little bit here and there, under the table job, nothing to really put on my work record. And so by the time I was 21, I was desperate for work, and I started to waitress in a strip club. And that was my entry into the adult industry. That was my entry into commercial sexual exploitation. And I remember looking at the girls dancing and just, you know, being touched by the patrons at the club. And I just remember thinking, feeling so grossed out by it and relieved that I wasn't in that position, that I could, you know, serve drinks and it was fine. I was making good money. And then 4 years into that, next thing I know, I'm doing it out of desperation, out of need to survive, out of the want to have this lifestyle, to the fast money. You know, I told myself every excuse in the book to make it okay. I was not okay in myself in it. I had to drink a lot in order to get up there and perform. And it was about a year into that, a year into stripping, I wanted to commit suicide. I was so spiritually and emotionally bankrupt. And looking back, the thoughts, the lies that I would tell myself in order to make this okay, it all stemmed from that early childhood sexual abuse, the grooming process that I went through, the idea that I had that sex equals love, abuse equals love. By the time I allowed myself to take on this role of, well, you know, if it's always been taken from me, so I might as well get paid for it. I might as well take my power back and get paid for it, because this is all I'm good for, is selling my body. This is all I'm good for. So that was the frame of thought that I had. And I had to tell myself that, 1, I liked it. 2, I was empowered by it. And I was so loud about that. I would tell everyone, yes, this is what I want to do. I am so empowered by this. I have my own money. I don't have to go to family, you know, blah, 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 blah. I told myself every lie in the book. But at the end of the day, I was lonely. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. And that I was just in the strip clubs. I wasn't at this point really selling myself yet. So once I got to that point, that's when the sex trafficking happened. I was trafficked out of the club I was working at by the security, by the people that worked at the club. And I saw girls that were trafficked into the club too. So it's like this crazy cycle, you know. So the legal venues of prostitution and the adult industry, you are going to see people that are trafficked. You're going to see it in, and you're going to see them trafficked out. And so my experience with that, not just the sex trafficking, but with the buyers alone, it was extreme violence. I was left for dead by a buyer, and that's what initially made me decide that this was not the life that I wanted. I was going to end up dead if I stayed in this life. You don't know which encounter is going to be your last, and you are in constant state of fear. You're telling yourself how to cope. You're telling yourself how to adapt to every situation. You're telling yourself that this is what you want in order to get through it. And at the end of the day, once you leave that life, once I finally left the life, that's when the symptoms of PTSD, that's when all the emotional turmoil all of that started to really show its face. And that's when I realized how damaging that life is, and how I would never, looking back now, 9 years out, and having trained delegates from around the world in response and protocol, and just the things that I've been able to do and accomplish. Looking back now, there is no way I would ever go back to that or choose that, because it is not a true choice. And it is a choice of no other choices, or no other realized choices. And there's no 401k plan, there's no benefits good enough to ever make me want to go back and choose that.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Marjorie, for sharing your stories. It's obvious that the need is for trauma-informed exit strategies that include housing, mental health, retraining, and helping with resumes and finding other jobs that you can go into. Again, thank you. For all of you who joined us late, this webinar is about full decriminalization of prostitution explained. Thank you for joining us. Our next speakers are from law enforcement, Damon Botvidas and Aaron Wolf from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and Special Agent Ernie Limon, Program Manager of the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force, standing in for Jeannie Franco, the Task Force Commander, Department of Justice. Thank you all for being here. And for the commander, we wish her a speedy recovery. Each one of them will speak for 7 minutes. And again, a reminder for the attendees, questions need to go into the Q&A. The chat is only going to the panelists. Questions need to go into the Q&A. Thank you. Damon?
Good afternoon. My name is Damon Botvidas. I'm a lead investigator for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I have 28 years total in law enforcement. I have been a sexual assault child abuse investigator for the past 10 years, and I was recently assigned to our human trafficking task force back in 2021. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you all today. This is my first time presenting, so please forgive my list of bullet points that I have to keep me on track. What I'm going to discuss with you is a law enforcement perspective, but it comes from a human trafficking task force that takes a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach to the rescue of victims and the investigation of crimes. My personal and professional opinion is that prostitution, loitering, or for the purpose of prostitution should not be legalized. My personal belief is that it's a question of morality, but I don't mean that from the traditional sense. I mean that where are we in the world where we can legally justify the exploitation of a woman's body for the purpose of profit? Legalization of prostitution is legalization of human trafficking. You cannot be against human trafficking if you support the legalization of prostitution, because they go hand in hand with one another. I say this because the process of bringing a woman into the world of prostitution or turning the girl out, it's a lengthy, violent process, both emotionally and physically. Pimps or traffickers go through a very specific process to break a woman's spirit. This can include rape, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and a distortion of what love is. Pimps or traffickers take advantage of the most vulnerable populations of our people, including mentally ill, the very poor, lonely and or homeless, or drug addicted persons. If you have a care about or a concern for the safety of a woman, you cannot support this type of legislation. It's an incredibly dangerous profession. Women involved are subjected to sexual assault, physical abuse, and at times death at the hands of their trafficker or their customer. Not to mention all the sexually transmitted diseases that they're exposed to. Myself and my partners on our task force, we've actually spoken with women where they were forced to have sex with men, regardless of how they felt, whether they were sick or if they were on their menstrual cycle. It didn't matter as long as the money kept coming in. And just, something very simple, we forget to mention that, women walk in the streets are forced to wear working clothes, or clothes that are very promiscuous in nature, like lingerie, very, very short, scantily clad types of outfits, even bathing suits. Imagine being in Los Angeles on a December night at 2 a.m. and walking the streets in something like that. These traffickers don't care about this. All they care about, as long as that money keeps coming in, and the only way the money is going to keep coming in is if that advertisement's out there. Once a woman has entered into the world of prostitution, it's very difficult to get out. Primary reason for this is the fact that most women are actively being trafficked by a pimp, and they're the pimp's primary source of income, and something that he's not easily going to give up because of the amount of time that it took to turn this girl out. So I've actually spoken with women that I've arrested, and they told me several reasons for not leaving the trade. Some of that, they don't have any resources to fall back in. They don't have an education. They're addicted to drugs. They have, shame, or they have no self-worth, and they're afraid. Allowing loitering to become legal will lead to more victims being trafficked, but their situation can be moved out of darkness into the public eye. This gives way to normalization, sets a poor standard for other young women and girls who might see that their bodies exist solely for the purpose of exploitation by men. It creates neighborhood blight, and it exposes our children to things that they don't need to see, and they normally wouldn't see. If we allow this loitering to continue, it legitimizes prostitution and the further exploitation of women. It does nothing to combat human trafficking. In fact, it only encourages it. Legalization will create two levels of prostitution, legal and illegal. One will operate in the open, however, there'll always be those ones who fail to comply with potential regulations and provide the same service for cheaper. For instance, marijuana. It's now legal in the state, but you still have the illegal growing and the illegal importation of it. Legislation does nothing to protect women. And if it does pass, what protections will we put in place to protect these women of this new sex industry? Will there be testing requirements, medical care, insurance requirements, workers' compensation? Legislation without a plan is a recipe for disaster. So how does this affect law enforcement? Legalization of loitering laws will lead to additional crimes. Pimping is a gang subculture. This will lead to additional gang violence, as pimps and their associated gang enforcers will have to compete for these newly opened areas to put out their girls. I believe this will move from the more traditional areas known as tracks, which will increase shootings, stabbings, and assaults. Because prostitutes are often attacked by their customers, decriminalization of loitering laws will provide more places for individuals seeking to do harm to women to find victims. This will lead to more reports of rape, sexual, and general physical assaults. Deaths will increase. This is a cash business. More women openly operating will inevitably lead to more people looking to take advantage of the money being exchanged. These incidents will lead to increases in police calls for service, which will take law enforcement away from doing their traditional work prior to the decriminalization. You want me to one? Okay, I'm almost okay. So many police departments have not had to deal with crimes related to illegal prostitution, but now we may be subjected to it. Taking away 653.22 of the Penal Code will take away a tool the law enforcement uses to prevent human trafficking, identifying victim, and rescuing victims and children being trafficked. I'll just cut it short from there.
Thank you so much, Damon. Aaron?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with each of you today. Hopefully the result of this webinar is very impactful, and there's more to come. So my name is Aaron Wolf. I have been in law enforcement for 22 years. Marissa, I've met you a few times. Thank you for all that you do. Of my 22 years, I've spent 15 years doing human trafficking investigations, which have focused primarily on domestic sex trafficking or runaways. Not that we don't have labor trafficking in California or in Riverside County where I work, but we see a high volume of runaway children, an average of 4,500 per year in Riverside County. And if you look at some of the stats, especially from the Department of Justice, they estimate that 1 out of every 7 runaways is a victim of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking in of itself is a $150 billion plus industry, and the sex industry is a $1 trillion industry. It's actually the biggest industry in the world today. So when you look at the sex industry and you look at prostitution or sex trafficking is prostitution. You can't have one without the other. I've created multiple post-certified vice and human trafficking courses for the state of California for my department. And you can't teach one without teaching, as far as vice or prostitution, without teaching the other, which is human trafficking, because they go hand in hand. So like Damon said, we are in opposition to legalizing or decriminalizing prostitution. Prostitution is a crime against a woman, and oftentimes people will say, well, they want to do it. It's their choice. But that's not necessarily the case. And the 15 years and the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women that I've spoken to, adults, to include adults, I've never had somebody say, when I grew up, I want to be a prostitute. When I grew up, this is what I want to do for a living. And every adult that I've spoken to has said, I started when I was a kid. I haven't met an adult who said they didn't start when they were 14, 15, 16, or 17 years old. Now, that doesn't mean that that doesn't happen. But in my experience, they've said they started as children. So when you look at human trafficking, you look at the children, one of the questions I have for the people who are watching this and, you know, who are trying to make a decision whether or not we should criminalize or keep it criminalized or decriminalize is talking about kids. This is a crime against children. And that's how we look at this. That's how I look at it. And that's what our focus is. And when you think about the term runaway, what does that imply? What does that mean? How many of you who are listening right now have children who have run away? And if you have, how many of them have run away because they were upset because their phones were taken away from them, or upset because their iPads were taken away from them? They didn't get to go to a party. Those kids are gone for 30 minutes, 2 hours at the most. They're not gone for multiple days at a time. When we look at our high risk victim, the kids who we are focusing on, these kids are running away from something. And what that typically is some type of sexual or physical abuse in the home. They're trying to get away. They don't want to continue to be victimized. So now you're 14, 15, which is the average age a child enters into a life of prostitution. Now you're 14 or 15 years old, you're out on the streets. How are you going to survive? How many of you who are watching this have run across, have been out with their families, and they see homeless children? We all know what a homeless adult looks like in a homeless encampment, but how many of you come across homeless kids? There's not a whole lot of them. That doesn't mean they don't exist, not what I'm saying, but there's not a whole lot. Why? Because children have a difficult time of surviving on the streets. So what are they supposed to do? They're taken advantage of. They can't go to McDonald's, they can't get a job, they're not of legal age. They're recruited, they're identified by pimps, they are taken to tracks, and they're forced into a life of prostitution. If they're not running away because they're not getting their way at home, or they're victims of sexual physical abuse, maybe they meet somebody online. And that's the day and age we're living in now, where they're using this mechanism, the internet, social media, to prey on children who have no self-esteem, no self-worth, and no self-confidence. They identify these kids, they build fictitious relationships with those children, and then they either convince those kids to start sending nude photographs, nude videos, which may in turn lead to some type of blackmail or worse, trafficking. They try to meet up with these kids, they groom them, they try to convince them that there's a life out there where they can get everything they want and that they'll take care of them and provide that love and support. So when it comes to children and pimps and human trafficking itself, if we were to decriminalize prostitution, us as law enforcement would no longer have the ability to contact these individuals who are working the streets. That's just one component. Look at all of the thousands of ads. There's I looked it up earlier today. I don't know where I put it, but 19. There's 19 million ads, online ads in California for prostitution. 19 million. That's a lot of ads in California. So you have the online side of it, you have the track side of it, the streets. If prostitution is legalized, what gives me the authority as law enforcement to conduct an online operation, to go look for somebody who's no longer committing a crime? What gives me the authority to go up to somebody who's on the street and to contact them, not from the perspective, because we're human trafficking, not vice. Now, we don't specialize in arrest. We're not stat driven. What gives us the ability to go up to them and talk to them on the street to and find out whether they're a victim or not? And oftentimes, unless you remove the victims away from the situation, they're not going to talk to you. A pimp doesn't drop off their girl and drive away and go to the next town and never see him again. Pimps sit across the street. They sit in the parking lot next door. They're always watching. After every date or after every $100, you're going and you're giving your pimp the money so you don't get John rolled, meaning you don't get robbed by the John. So they're always being controlled. We have to take them out of a situation, out of that life, out of that position, if we are to get any type of disclosure. And without disclosure, we don't have a case. We don't have an investigation. So it is imperative that prostitution, the crime of prostitution, remain a crime, or prostitution itself remains a crime. I'm sorry. It's imperative because it gives law enforcement the tools that we need to identify victims. Now, what can we do as far as the law goes, and what the other side of this is, which is the legalization, and they're proposing that we legalize it. What I think we can do is we can change the penal code. We can make it so that if you are arrested for prostitution, no fine and no jail time. There's no fine, there's no jail exposure. We can make it so that you have to go to some type of diversion program, and that diversion program will provide for some type of education and offer resources. These girls, again, these women have spent a life, especially starting when they were kids, involved in prostitution, which also leads to a lot of robberies and burglaries and a lot of other crimes. They might have criminal records, not for prostitution, but because, for a 211 a robbery, or a 459 a burglary, or a 10851, which is an auto theft. And they can't get jobs. They don't have those abilities. What are they supposed to do? When I have talked to adult women who have gotten out of the life of being involved in prostitution, and then they've gotten re-involved in the life, almost every single one of them told me the same thing. I tried to make it work for several years and I couldn't. There was nothing, I couldn't support my family. I can't support my kids. I can't support myself. I know I can go back into this life because I made a lot of money before and I can make it again. And I can use that to support my family. And so we need to figure out a way to offer that to them so they don't have to go back into that life. And I think if we were to allocate resources, financial resources to their education, to jobs, to growth, we would be able to overcome this, and there's no reason to legalize it.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Ernie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ernie Limon. I'm the special agent in charge of the California Department of Justice, our San Diego office. I'm also the program manager for the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force. I'm sitting in for our task force commander, Jeannie Franco, who couldn't make it today. I want to echo some of the things that Damon and Aaron were saying, and they gave some great example as to why human trafficking should not be legalized. We're one of the few task forces, by the way, that is HIDTA funded, the high intensity drug trafficking area. And we see violence, we see drugs that are involved with victims of human trafficking. The problem is, right now, we're already hampered by, it's always kind of a cat and mouse game with the people that are sex trafficking these victims. So they're always thinking of something new. And these laws that are being proposed are going to further hamper us. As Damon and Aaron said, the lawyering, the pandering going away. We're a very proactive task force. We're on call 24/7, so we get calls from agencies. So we kind of see that whole thing. We are both proactive and reactive. And the proactive gamut of things, when we're out there doing surveillances, when we get leads and stuff like that, can you imagine now if prostitution was legalized? It's just like Aaron said, how would we go about trying to rescue victims, identify victims, if there's certain things that we can't do? Aaron gives an example of, the pimps standing across the street, and those are real life. And the two out of the past 3 days, we had 2 examples of that this week, where we rescued victims, and after interviewing them, they're talking about the violence, how a pimp held a gun to their head, how they got beaten, stuff like that. So a lot of times what we're seeing, what the public sees is, hey, this is prostitution. They don't kind of see the behind the scenes things. They don't see the things that are inhibiting law enforcement. And these things that are being proposed is not necessarily anything new. I think in 1990s, Netherlands decided to legalize prostitution in the hopes that, or one of the hopes is to stop child sex trafficking. And what they saw was a 300% increase in child sex trafficking. So I think some people are proposing, hey, let's try this. Some of the stuff has been tried and it has not had the intended effect. One of the things that illegal or prostitution has right now is kind of like, that stigma. There's a deterrent effect. And I think if you get rid of that, that's just going to empower the sex traffickers. And it's not going to help us. I don't think it's going to help the victims. I think they're going to feel less able to go out and report it and go to law enforcement. And the sex traffickers are, obviously going to have feel more empowered with no risk. So this is definitely going to hamper us. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was trying to admit our district attorney here and make her into a panelist. Thank you for being here with us. So at this time, I want to thank Damon, Aaron, and Ernie. Thank you so much. And as you heard, 1 of every 7 runaway kids become a victim of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking victims are both are women, children, including boys and men. 90% of victims of sex trafficking that are women or girls are US citizens. So we're busting some of the myths that are out there. There's 10 to 14,000 foreign victims of human trafficking that are brought into the US. But as I mentioned, 90% of sex trafficking victims that are women and girls are US citizens. Our next speakers are leaders of advocacy organizations who are in the trenches day in, day out, providing services to human trafficking victims and survivors. Dr. Stephanie Powell, Director of Law Enforcement Training and Survivor Services at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, with 30 years at LAPD, Laston, and Vice. Marissa Ugarte, the Executive Director of Bilateral Safety Corridor, a walking encyclopedia on drug cartels, gangs, Chinese mafia, and Vanessa Russell, founder and executive director of Love Never Fails. Each will speak for 7 minutes. Thank you for being here today. And for those of you who joined late, this webinar is about the full decriminalization of prostitution explained. Thank you for being with us. Stephanie. Dr. Powell.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'd like to start with, when we talk about decriminalization of prostitution, full decriminalization, what that means is that it is completely legal. There is no law. When we talk about legalization, there is regulation surrounding it. So when we talk about the legalization of marijuana, just like the officer spoke before, I can't open a marijuana place out of my house. I can't. But when it comes to full decriminalization of the full decriminalization of prostitution, guess what? I can open up a brothel. So I think we really need to understand not the impacts of this, regardless of whether you live in Beverly Hills or in South Central Los Angeles. It will affect each and every one of us. I think what's also important to state is the fact that prostitution is inherently harmful, full stop. And there's studies to back it. For me, I see this whole issue on different levels or through different lenses. I see it from an academic lens. I see it from a law enforcement end. I see it from a nonprofit end. I was the executive director for Journey Out. But more importantly, I see it as a community member who I still am out on the street doing outreach in Figueroa. I want to also say before I actually get started that the National Center on Sexual Exploitation looks at the areas of pornography, human trafficking, and sexual exploitation through research, corporate advocacy, legislative advocacy, and our law center. Right now, we are suing Twitter, Pornhub, and brothels in Las Vegas. Prostitution is inherently harmful. Again, bottom line. A study that was done by Melissa Farley in 2004 entitled Prostitution and Trafficking in 9 Countries, in which she studied over 800 people. Guess what it says in that study? It says that 71% were physically assaulted, 63% raped, 89% wanted to escape. So one listening to that may say, okay, well, that was back in 2004. Well, as the former executive director of Journey Out, I asked them to look at the intakes because I remember on the intakes, it asked the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? None of those respondents said that they want to see themselves continued in prostitution. They saw themselves as either school teachers or cosmetologists doing anything but what they were doing now. So I want you to put a pin in that for just a moment. Those of us that are doing direct services, we're picking up the pieces. We are seeing the harmful effects. We see the things that these same politicians that want to legalize this don't see, because some of them have not taken the time to actually go into the communities that they serve. I've asked them, how many of you have actually been on Figueroa? I hear crickets. So the idea that full decriminalization is the way to uplift the marginalized and seeing that as a fix, it's not a fix. First of all, we need to take away the obstacles of a failing institutionalized system that includes education, that includes health, that includes jobs. Because it's already been stated here. Sometimes you make a choice when you have no choice. Again, the same people who are pushing this legislation are the same ones that say to me that this will give Black women autonomy over their bodies. First of all, Black women have autonomy over their body. So what you're saying is, if I go by this idea, that now that I have autonomy over my body, I need to go tell my daughter, hey, you can go to law school or you could do the whole prostitution thing because, girl, you know it's legal now. Is that anything that anybody on this call would want for their daughters? And the answer to that would be no. Why? Because it's harmful. When we look at the fact that 40 to 50% of victims of human trafficking nationwide are African American, when you look at that and you realize that, first of all, it breaks my heart to even have to say that. Secondly, it breaks my heart that someone wants to do full decriminalization as a way to be able to uplift those that are making a choice that they don't need to make. I encourage each and every one of you, especially politicians, think twice. Think twice, follow the money. Who does it help? Who does it hurt? And who it hurts is marginalized communities. Who it hurts are those that could be protected by law enforcement that need certain laws in place to find the girls that look like me. Pay attention, think twice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Powell. Very powerful. Thank you so much. Next is Marisa Ugarte.
Welcome to all. I'm going to start with my usual comment. which is the first right of a woman is the right not to have to prostitute. It's economic violence and gender inequality that brings her there. But we are not looking at who is funding this and why is it all about the money versus victims. We're looking at a person like Soros. We're looking at the Amnesty International. We're talking about the ACLU. But no one is talking about what really needs to happen so women do not suffer and feel that the only choice they have is to be out in the street. It is painful. I mean, I have seen it with 2,500 victims. Here you are, you have to pay an apartment, you have to feed your child, and you got no way to do it because nobody's working with you into trying to get you a better job or educate you or find something that you can do that is not college versed, but other kinds of industries like staging or not just going into a McDonald's when you're not make the money. The other side, the bad side, organized crime, and everyone else is, doing this with their hands and their whiskers, okay? I get the women, I get the money, and who cares about the victim? Money goes to the pocket of the buyer, and the buyer's money goes into the pocket of the traffickers, pimps, and organized crime. And then we're talking about who comes in, how they come in, but not just doing part. They're having these women that get work permits, go exactly what Damon talked about and what Aaron, they're in stash houses cleaning crystal meth and other products. They're, cleaning the illicit marijuana. In San Diego, a lot of them have been found that way. And what about talking and documenting how many of these victims of the buyers that now we want to decriminalize have been killed, stabbed, burned, choked, and thrown out the freeway on the 94 so another car would kill them? Why are we not talking about sanctioning those who want that to happen? We're talking about kids. So law enforcement and me and everybody else is right. They won't be able to go and talk to a child. Oh my God, to the benefit of the pedophile. I can get the child and pretend I don't. Okay, so who are the pedophiles that are involved in this? Is a man with all these millions of dollars, billions, like Soros, not funding something like the grants that, like LCLU, Point Loma Nazarene is doing, the work that Jessica is doing, the work that Marjorie is doing. Why are you not funding that? Why is it the agency that got $30 million to go and tell law enforcement in LA that they don't want them anymore is the one that is benefiting all? And what about somebody out there coming and saying, and now we need to decriminalize the buyers, which is the main source with the demand. Without the demand, there wouldn't be any trafficking, either for labor or sex or mixed. So we need to really consider how is it that we as groups can go after the real people that are behind this organized crime and people that are going to benefit from the funds that they're getting for this and the benefit of the funds that these poor women and children are bringing in to the hands of the pimps, to the hands of the traffickers, into the hands of organized crime. Let's not just talk about gangs. Remember, we used to think that, Pimp Host Daily and all of the other ones that we had were the real deal. The real deal is everybody wants to make money and women. So it's very convenient not to offer them any other kind of job like Andrea's talking about and Stephanie and everybody else. What kind of jobs are you offering them? No one can make money in McDonald's. You can't be a beautician and think that that's the only industry. We are trying to work to see how is it that we can improve the lives of women by making them real estate license, staging, uh, welding, other types of industry that doesn't need that much. We need to go out there and go after the guys that are funding this and where the money is going. Because one of the biggest things that has been, accounted for is money laundering. So where is the money going? Because it's not going into the hands of the women. And of course, it's not going into the hands of the children. So you have also mixed things that children are doing, like candy sales, magazine sales, begging. We're not doing anything to prevent this from happening. I beg you to consider that we know money versus victims. And that's where we need to do, like I agree with everyone in the panel, follow the money and not decriminalize them. I would criminalize the people that are promoting this for having ulterior motives. That's all I have to say. I think I was enough impactful to tell you that I'm almost in tears in knowing and seeing how many of these girls have died, how I saw this woman stabbed 11 times and set on fire, how a military guy threw another one out the window. What is this? Why are we accepting this? And why is it that the legislators and everybody else out there is not considering what is going on? There is no discrimination on prostitution. All colors are in there, like we talked about, not one. So why are we really talking about the wrong thing? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marissa. Vanessa?
Yes, hi. Okay, so I'm so grateful to be here. My name is Vanessa Russell, as was mentioned. I'm the founding executive director of Love Never Fails. We are a national anti-trafficking organization that's been in place for the last 11 years. I wanted to let you know that we are a housing provider, so we provide housing to women and their children that are exiting exploitation, also to men and their families and their children, and also to girls ages 13 to 17. We have 27 beds. We've housed over 200 people in the last 6 years. We also provide IT education. So we are an IT biz tech academy, a state certified pre-apprenticeship program. And we specifically created our IT Academy so that we could not only provide housing, but sustainable careers in IT for survivors of human trafficking and other vulnerable community members. And I mention that because I think it is at the core of this issue of decriminalization. And what I believe is happening, and the reason why there's such a movement to kind of prey upon the vulnerabilities even more of people who claim to be for decriminalization, is that people are they're preying on the fact that individuals who are touting that this is the right strategy don't know their own power, don't know their own earning power, don't know that they can do something else, don't know that there's other people being successful in other industries. And I want to let you know, we have educated over 400 people since 2018. I'm sure the world has told those people, if you're listening now, that you can't do it, that you don't have the IQ, that you're not smart enough. And it's just simply not true. We're seeing people that are excelling in these industries as carpenters, as electricians, as real estate agents, as sales reps, as customer service reps, as project managers. And in the tech industry, it is absolutely possible. And so let me go back to, and I just want to build on what we heard from Dr. Powell, from Marisa, from Marjorie, from the survivors, Jessica, everyone, the law enforcement officers that are here. Decriminalization. What is this thing? What exactly is this thing? I'm very concerned that we seem to think that by removing law enforcement, all of a sudden we create this harmonious utopia where everyone starts behaving properly and starts helping each other out. All of a sudden, buyers float into the hotel room and respect the people that they're buying, and exploiters no longer hold people prisoner and choke them out if they don't make their daily quota, no longer pull out patches of their hair and knock out their teeth, no longer subject them to having sex with 21 people a day, standing out on a street corner, 4'11", under 100 pounds wet, standing running in the dark, getting in the cars with grandpas and grandmas, with people who smell, who have boils on them, and telling them, hey, this is what you want to do. Isn't this a great career? Isn't this what you've aspired to be all of your life? Isn't this empowering? Isn't this wonderful? No. This is not going to stop just because you remove the police. In fact, I received a phone call this morning from a mother desperate. Her daughter is 19, sent her away to college in another state. The daughter there's such a strategy in place where this individual had been grooming the daughter in the middle of the year. And now the daughter has dropped out of college, is no longer returning home, and only provides mom proof of life, meaning she only calls periodically to say, I'm fine, mom. I'm fine. But she never answers the call. This is a Black young lady, a 19-year-old who was adopted. And this is a Black family that is doing well, that has worked their bones to the ground to be able to put their daughter in college. But now because their daughter is 19, she's an adult, that the traffickers have trained her what to do, what to say, so that she can basically not be checked on and not be followed up on. And meanwhile, every night she's being sold out of a casino nearby, and someone's having an Uber pick her up from her home and send her over to these casinos to have $1,000 dates with this one and that one. And one would say, she's choosing that, right? She's choosing that. She's not being coerced. And this is what my challenge is to anybody who talks about decriminalization. I need you, whoever you are, to go and do some research about mental health, about the prefrontal cortex, about the amygdala hijacking, about trauma, about the impact that this kind of trauma has on the brain. And tell me that people are not traumatized and coerced into making these so-called decisions, into their so-called agency. It's not true. It's not true. They're not taking up agency. What they are is brainwashed. And the people who are resounding and who are speaking so loudly about this, people who are speaking so loudly in support of this, are coming from a place of privilege, many of them. They're coming from either being in a place where they've been in this business so long that they only have to see a few dates. They have a few sugar daddies lined up so they don't have to go out on the blade anymore. Either they're coming from that place, or they're coming from, I once met one of our staff members, met a medical doctor who said, I want to do this. Well, good. You're empowered to do that because you have alternatives. A choice is not a choice unless you have a choice. And these individuals who don't have any skills, no education, no home, no family support, they don't have any other alternatives. And so my advocacy is for exit strategies. We cannot do anything about exploitation or about sex work or about these poor distributions of power until we get housing in place, mental health services in place, medical in place, workforce development in place. And until people start putting their money where their mouth is and actually infusing dollars into these places where we're so sorely lacking, all I'm left to think is, people just want access to young bodies. People just want access to Black bodies, to brown bodies without anybody looking, to vulnerable people, to people who are undocumented, to poor families. And I hope that's not the case, but it sure is looking like that to me. And so that is where I stand on this. And I would just want to leave you with a bill that all of us here have worked on, contributed to, and it is called the Pathways to Safety Bill. We have been trying to get adoption for it. It's pathwaystosafety.com. If you want to look at it, it is our proposal to provide these exit services to the survivors who are the most important people in this discussion. And I'll hand it back to you, Rima.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've already put the link in the Q&A for Pathway to Safety. So thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa, Marissa, and Stephanie. Powerful testimonials. Next, we're going to go to our last speaker. Our last speaker is none other than the San Diego County District Attorney, Samar Stefan, whose track record in fighting human trafficking is unparalleled, including human trafficking prevention program in all public schools in San Diego County. DA Stefan will wrap up this program and will speak for up to 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be the full 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes. Thank you so much for what you're doing, DA Stefan. Thank you. And we've heard that, again, victims, traffickers do not discriminate. All what they care about is greed. It's a $150 billion industry. They don't care about your socioeconomic background, your ethnicity, your race, your religion. All are equal because money is money, and that's what they care about. DA Stefan.
You so much. It's an honor to be with you, Rima, and also with all of the esteemed panelists. I know many of them. We've been through a long journey, and I'm now meeting some new people and very excited about our future collaboration. So to set a little bit of background, like Rima said, I'm San Diego County's district attorney. And San Diego County is the second largest county in our state. It's the fifth largest in the nation. We serve 3.3 million people. We are a town that has many nationalities and a bustling airport. We've got sports teams. We're not close, we adjoined the Mexico border. So we have all of the different complexities of an urban county. As I rose through the ranks for 28 years as a prosecutor before becoming the elected district attorney in 2018, I had the privilege of forming the first specialized sex crimes division, and then fighting for the law to pass in the state of California in 2005 to make human trafficking also a violation of state law. In 2000, it became a violation of federal law, but California did not have a state law to pass it. And I give you this as background because essentially this effort to decriminalize is dismantling the years of fight and work that we did, raising the voices of victims and survivors to pass a state law that criminalizes human trafficking in order to protect victims, in order to bring the protection of the law. As Dr. Martin Luther King best put it, to understand the power of the law is, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I cannot make another man's heart love me, but I can make sure that he's held accountable under the law, essentially. Meaning, without the power of the law, you are trusting that people are just going to behave and that they're going to treat vulnerable people and victims of human trafficking and exploitation and as human beings. And that's absolutely not our history. This is, unless you have a protection of the law, you are essentially exposing the most vulnerable who can't hire attorneys and build gates and support themselves and secure themselves. You're exposing them to harm in a big way. So it really saddens me, after we won that fight in 2005 to protect victims and to dignify life, by passing the Human Trafficking Act that we've expanded upon year after year after year. So now we see this movement towards decriminalizing. And the problem with the movement is it claims to be new, but it's actually old. If human trafficking is modern day slavery, then we know that the only thing that extracted people out of slavery was to have laws that criminalized slave owners and slavery in order to free people. So we're now going back in time and trying to dismantle the very laws that protect life and protect the most vulnerable. Now, when I talk to people that are part of the decriminalize movement, I try to explain, and I will explain to our audience here today, what that really means in real life. What that really means, because we're a country of laws, a police officer, our amazing human trafficking task force, would not be able to do search warrants, to do investigations which require search warrants, undercover operations. Why? Because the underpinning crime is decriminalized. So what are you basing your search warrant on? Let me give you an example. You have a hunch. This hunch as a police officer is based in science, is based in years of knowing that in human trafficking, in brothels, in massage parlors, whatever is legal, that they're going to have adults and then they're going to have some minors. We know this because it takes 3 years to discover that someone was abused as a minor. On an average, if they began being abused at 16, which is the average age of actually being in prostitution, you are going to wait 3 years before you actually save them. If you now try to write a search warrant saying, I would like to go in and just inspect this business to see if they have any minors, you will never get a judge to sign it. That's not our laws in America. You need probable cause. Probable cause, that's cause that is based in evidence, but you cannot get the evidence because the crime that would be the basis for the evidence is now decriminalized. You cannot write a search warrant for human trafficking when you don't have the underpinning crimes of prostitution, so you can actually never expose human trafficking. And that's actually the very goal. This is why organized crime is dancing in the streets, that they are selling big-hearted, honest people on the idea that they are saving poor, vulnerable people from being prosecuted. So that is the issue, is you're essentially, by decriminalizing, you're taking out the legs from under all of our prosecutions and our human trafficking task force that is built on laws of establishing probable cause by having a crime that you then can do search warrants to expand and expand and expand to actually, I'll give you one example. We had a young gal, she's an adult. She was skin and bones. She was in prostitution. The officer never wanted to arrest her for prostitution. He just wanted to know who is exploiting her and why is she skin and bones and abused and has all these marks. If prostitution was legal, there's no way he could write the search warrants that then helped us to get the social media, to get the text messages. When we got those text messages and communication, we saw that this terrible, terrible person had her dog, the only thing in her life that she felt loved her, and would put the dog, he would tell her, in the rescue to be euthanized unless she met her quota. None of this would have been apparent but for being able to do a full investigation to find out that this was human trafficking based on duress and coercion. The second part of this is the use of words. Words matter. And there has been an intentional effort to use the word sex work because that then brings it into the fold of people choosing their line of work. And the number one question, similar to Dr. Powell, that I like to ask to legislators is, do you believe that you want your own child to choose to have, that it will be a choice to go into sex work? Because if your answer is no, then you are committing extreme prejudice and abuse because you think your child is more important than someone else's child. And their dignity and freedom is not measured equally. So do not talk to me about equity, about freedom, about dignity, about liberty, if you are willing to choose this imaginary sex work, because I have yet to meet one, but I've met many that have told me that they are not being exploited and forced until their trafficker was removed from the picture. Then the real story comes out. So educate yourself. What you are talking about is the very liberty, life, and freedom of human beings. You're talking about exploitation. And this is not new. This is old. Rhode Island did this for many years. They found that organized crime rose, that there were more murders, there was more serial killers going after what they thought were unprotected people. This was a failed experiment. In 2009, they abandoned this experiment. So this is not new. This has been done in other countries. It's been done in the United States, and it's been an absolute abysmal failure. But what it means to fail, it means you're failing human beings, which we should not be experimenting on human beings. We know from history what has happened. Let us not repeat history. Let's do better.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, District Attorney Summer Stephan. What a great wrap up. Again, I want to thank all the panelists for being here and all the attendees. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. But if you're going to raise your hand, you need to tell us what your name is and where do you work, where you come from. So
they have to type their questions in the question box because they have no audio, so they can't ask a question live.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, so this is your chance to ask any and all or all of the panelists your questions about full decriminalization of prostitution. And while you're typing those questions, just a few facts. As you know, on the FBI list, we have 3 counties in California that are on the top 13 counties in the nation as far as trafficking in children. We have 3 counties in California: San Francisco, LA, and San Diego. And so, number 1 calls, California has the number 1 calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And we thank law enforcement and district attorneys, including District Attorney Summer Stephan, for what they're trying to do in order to end this violence against women. What is the root cause of this problem? We all need to think about the root cause. And the root cause, why aren't we not trying to end this violence against women? It's gender-based violence. It's also the lack of opportunity, the lack of gender equity, the lack of gender equality. So we have to go on 2 tracks. One, instead of booking the victims, we need to provide extra exit strategies that are trauma informed, that needs to include housing, mental health, and other services. And at the same time, we need to do education and prevention in order to stop future victims. We have to go against after the demand. We have to punish the demand because, as one of the panelists said, without the demand, there's no need for the supply. And as you also heard, the demand is for younger and younger kids. They are in our middle schools and in our high schools. They send peer recruiters. As someone here in the panel can address what is going on in our high schools and middle schools and peer recruiters.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. So some of the things that are happening in our high schools, I'll highlight a case that I've had. A gang out of Los Angeles, rolling 60s. They were inserting juveniles into different schools throughout Riverside County and throughout the Inland Empire. And those individuals, those females, were recruiting other girls. They were identifying girls who kind of met that threshold of what we consider a high-risk victim. They recruited those girls, convinced them that, you know, there's this great life waiting for them, and ultimately took those girls to meet their pimps or their boyfriends, who turned out to be the pimps, and took them to LA, where they were forced to work on Long Beach Boulevard in Compton. And so it's happening in our schools. We identified 12 different victims. Multiple schools were used. So from a recruiting standpoint, there's one example, but from another awareness standpoint, we have recently partnered with the Riverside County Office of Education in Riverside County, along with the Palm Desert High School, who has a media production elective. And we are finalizing 2 PSAs that are going to go out to all 6th through 12th graders, and a PSA that's going to go out to all faculty in Riverside County. So everybody's going to have to watch these. It's going to be mandated through the county Office of Education. And then with the students, they're going to review these in their homerooms, and there'll be a 20-minute interactive Q&A with the teacher to discuss what they saw in the video. The video for the students is a skit. It's my philosophy was it's created by students for students versus a 44-year-old man such as myself trying to develop something for teenage kids. I'm behind the scenes kind of guiding it, if you will, but it's a skit that's going to show a good student, a straight A student, somebody who has perfect attendance, all those types of things, who all of, you know, it's time to go to the dance. Her friends say, you know, are you going to go to the dance with us? Or are you going to bring? She says, oh, I can't go. They say, why not? She says, because my boyfriend, he doesn't want me to, he'll get upset. And then they ask her, well, when, you know, where did you meet this boyfriend? We didn't know you had a boyfriend. Why don't you bring him? And it goes into, well, he's older. I met him online. And you start seeing indicators. And eventually the video ends, or it goes on to where she's starts being late for classes. She starts missing school. She ends up branded with a tattoo. Her grades fell. And then at the very end of the video, you see her in a hotel room getting ready to be trafficked by a shadowy figure, which is myself. And it's to educate the students within Riverside County as to this is what you can look for in schools. In the past, when I first started doing this, trafficking was, or traffickers used malls, parks, schools, physical locations to recruit their victims. Now what we're finding is most recruitment is done online. So we want to make kids aware.
Thank
If I
you.
can just share a little bit, sorry, kind of similar to what Erin was talking, we have a program here in San Diego County. So in 2016, actually, we led a research, Point Loma Nazarene led a research here in San Diego to try to find out how, what was the impact. And out of this research led by Dr. Jamie Gates and Carpenter, came out the results that in the 20 high schools that they went into to find out if trafficking was happening, in all 20 high schools, there was a trafficking situation or recruiting situation. So out of that came out the No More program, which is the prevention curriculum. And how we reach the youth is that it's a drama-based curriculum. So we use 5 actors that play out a scene of a traditional trafficking and grooming situation from the beginning, middle, and end. And so we engage the youth because they know a lot more than we give them credit for. So we engage them to find out, what did you see? What are the indicators? What are the red flags? And so we also invite the audience to come into the acting scene, which is something that is really impactful. Along with that, this program is led also by a survivor advocate. So we get to share part of the story to build that safe space for others to come forward. So thanks.
Thank you. One question, yes, I'll get to you, Marissa. One question is about pathway to safety. There is no Senate bill or assembly bill number yet. We're trying to find an elected official who will adopt it and introduce it. Then you will have either a Senate bill if it's a senator or an assembly bill if it's an assembly member. Marissa.
Yeah, well, I want to say something. One of the things that we do with High Tech High here in San Diego was get 2 interns, and we worked on something really important. From a team perspective, what did parents need to know? So they created a whole PowerPoint that we presented to Jeannie at the Human Trafficking Task Force of what kids think parents should know about sexual exploitation, trafficking, and everything else. And I think it's going to be a success because one of the things that we're not addressing also is the parents. And then we're still not addressing, I'm still, Andrea, Stephanie, I'm very adamant to go after the dirty dozen, because one of the things we identified was websites like Go Get a Sugar Daddy and other things that are going on where kids feel that they can be secure and get the money that they want, that the parent is not giving them or whatever. So then they did another one, the kids, and it was, why do teens use drugs? And it's an amazing PowerPoint. We're just going to present it on June 9th at the High Tech High. But if anyone wants to revise them and view them, I would be glad to, to also offer that, especially the parents one. Parents don't know what's going on, don't know what to do with it. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. I don't want to take much time because there's a lot more to be said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I see Stephanie has her hand up.
Yeah, very quickly, I just wanted to remind everyone that I believe it was around 2018, Assembly Bill 1227. And what that does, it's a California bill that mandates, or it directs that human trafficking awareness and prevention has to be taught in middle and in high school. The problem with that bill was that there was no money behind it, and there was not a lot of direction for the schools. So the schools didn't know, should the health teacher be teaching this? Should the sex ed teacher be teaching this? Physical ed, who should? So there is a bill that is actually out there, AB 1227, that gives that direction to California schools.
Thank you. And I also put that in the Q&A. I answered that in the Q&A. And a good number of the nonprofits here, including Global Hope, do go out into the schools and go over the red flags, both for the teachers and parents and also for the students. And as District Attorney Summer Stephan, when she rolled out that program by the Three Strands Global Foundation in San Diego County, it was through a $2 million grant from the UBS Foundation. The Three Strands Global Foundation is in 48 out of the 58 counties in California. Neither Orange County, where I'm in, or LA County have such a program. So we're looking for funding, and that answers some of the questions that you have, because there were no funding behind AB 1227. It's going to be closer to 900,000 for LA County and 750,000 for Orange County. But in the meantime, there's all these nonprofits like us that help go into schools, both private and public schools. When I spoke at Sage Hill Private School in Newport Coast, one of the students said to me, this presentation needs to be done for our parents. And so again, let me now look at Julie. Do we have other questions in the chat? Let me look at the time. Okay, it's 1:30. Thank you all for being here. If anyone of the panelists needs a 1-minute closing statement, I ask everybody's patience. If you have to go, I understand. We respect your time. But if any of the panelists would like to make a closing statement, you have 1 minute.
I
Yes,
would like just in closing is for especially the politicians. You're the ones that can make the difference. I want to leave you with this. The same communities that you say that you're helping by passing laws like SB 357 and for decriminalization of prostitution, the same people that you say you're trying to help, please understand from someone from the community, you're hurting.
Thank you. Vanessa.
And I want to make just to say a few words to any survivors that might be listening or people that have been harmed in this way. I think it's just always important to say, to echo to them that you're valuable, you're important. We're all here because we care about you, and there are services and there is hope for you. And this is very traumatizing for many of them as they think about it being legalized, the crime that has been committed against them. And as I've housed, hundreds of survivors, when I've talked to them, especially when, like Marjorie said, when they're away from this life for a while, and they start to realize the enormity of what has been done to them, they take joy in knowing that others will be able to get out. They take joy in knowing that there'll be parameters put in place on the people's lives so that maybe the next girl, the next boy won't go through what they did. And this will reverse so much of the progress that has been made. So I just want to say to you, we're fighting the fight and for you, and and you are valuable, you're important, you're worth it.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And I would like to close. Any other closers before I do? Any other closing remarks before I do? Okay, seeing none. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Senator Shannon Grove for introducing SB 1042, which would have made human trafficking a violent crime. That would have gone a long way, because if you think that a woman or a child that are being raped 12 to 20 times, 30 times a day to benefit a trafficker. I'm not calling them a pimp, because this culture that glorifies pimp, this exploiter, this trafficker, if you think that is not a violent crime, I don't know what is. SB 1042 should have passed, and it's shame on these senators that voted against it. So us constituents need to call all of our senators and assembly members and say, we need to bring back SB 1042 and we need to vote it in. And I want to thank everyone for your patience, for attending, for your questions. If we didn't answer your question now, we'll answer it next time, because we will do this on a quarterly basis, because the education will continue. Some of the panelists will be the same, and we'll also have other panelists for you. So again, thank you for attending. Combating sex trafficking requires all of us to work together to protect the vulnerable members of our society. Legalizing pimping, pandering, and buying creates the caste system of exploitation. Two categories of women: one that deserves access to economic and educational opportunities, to a work environment free of sexual harassment, to a life free of violence, and the other, a class of women, girls, and trans women condemned to the sex trade and to future of violence, condemned to sexual exploitation, and to future of violence without vision and hope. We hope the webinar was very informative for you. As we mentioned, this webinar was recorded and will be housed on the Global Hope 365 YouTube channel. We will conduct these seminars on a quarterly basis to keep the dialogue going and answer all your questions. And if you like to be on our newsletter, email list, or to contact any of the speakers, please send an email to Rima, R-I-M as in Mary A, globalhope365.org. Thank you all and have a great weekend.
Take care. Good to see everyone.
Thank you so much. And we will send you that information, District Attorney.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Summer,
Hello.
good to see you.
Good to see you always.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Oh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you, Julie,
Hey,
for all
Rima,
your
how
help.
did I do? Did I
We
do
still
okay?
have, you did marvelous. We still have attendees that can listen to all this. So I'm going to stop the recording.
Can I do okay? Julie, I did okay?
Very well. You did very well. We still have attendees here that are listening to us. So I wanted you.
Okay,
to
I
know
just
that.
wanted to know that I got my
No.
point across.
You got your
Love you
point
guys.
across very, very well. And I thank you for taking the time, Marissa. I mean,
I
we
love
should
you guys.
have a webinar just for you. Okay. All right, Julie, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who's attending. Have a great weekend.
Rima,
Yeah.
before you end it, can you save the Q&A?
Let me do that.
I saved the chat, but if you can save the Q&A, I'm not sure if we need it, but just in case. You guys did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, there is something in the chat. Let me see. Felicia saying you did great.
Oh,
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Looking forward to get the recording.
perfect.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Were there any questions that we didn't answer?
There were some I didn't mark as answered, but I think we covered them. The only one that I don't think we specifically got to was Melissa Palomeri from Operation Underground Railroad and wanting to know more specifically about the budget.
Funding and the budget.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep. I'd love to get an answer to that question. What is the funding for human trafficking in California? Is it county by county? Is it statewide? And how's that money all divided? Those are really good questions. I like that
Yeah,
question a
we're
lot.
gonna ask the AG for that. Let me just save the Q&A 1 second on a, hold on.
Jessica answered that.
Yes, I saved them on Google Keeps. We have all of them. And let me make sure.
So the 3 open questions we touched on, but we could probably, go into more if we wanted to go into a lot more in-depth answers on those questions. Maybe those are worth saving for the next webinar.
Yes.
The 3 open questions.
Let me add more. Okay. Let me see. Open. Let's go to open. Okay. Control A, Control C.
I'm not sure who the 414 or 415 number is who's still on, and Amy Sharp and Ayaba Adams are still on. Greg and Penny obviously are I don't know if you can end the call for some people and not all.
I don't know that I can. Let me see. 1 second.
Oh, okay. That's just Penny. Hi, Penny. We can't hear you though.
Let me promote her to a panelist.
And Greg hung up.
I click on it so many times and it doesn't take right away. Promote to panelist. It's not doing it.
I think it will in a second.
Penny declined. Oh, she declined.
Okay.
Okay, all right. There's only, okay, I guess we're done.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you so much for your help. You think it's
Absolutely.
good? You think it's good?
I think it was really good. Yeah, I think people
so.
liked it. People always really get a lot from victim testimony. That's huge. And Stephanie and Vanessa particularly were so powerful. I was just loved it. Loved it. Loved it. It was great. All right. Are we having a debrief on Monday or no?
Yeah, because we have a meeting. I'll send a reminder.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. See you
Bye.
later. Bye.